I was 3 hours into refinishing a 40-year-old sailboat hull when the woman in the white linen blazer walked into my boatyard like she owned the tide. It was a Tuesday morning in late September, the kind of morning in Annapolis where the air smells like salt and diesel, and the light hits the water at an angle that makes you forget you have bills. I had my back to the dock, running a sander along a cracked keel, when my partner Russ tapped me on the shoulder and pointed without saying anything. She was already picking her way through the yard, stepping around coiled rope and rusted cleats in heels that had no business being anywhere near fiberglass dust. She had dark hair pulled back tight, a phone in one hand, and the kind of posture that comes from a lifetime of people clearing the room when she walked in. She did not look lost. That was the thing. Lost people look around. She looked only at me. "You Eli?" she called. "Depends on what broke," I said. She stopped about 5 feet away and looked at the hull, then at me. "Nothing broke." "Not yet." I set the sander down and pulled off my gloves. "Eli Marsh, what can I do for you?" "I'm Sutton." She said it the way people say a name when they expect it to land. In Annapolis, Vance landed. Chandler Vance had built half the waterfront properties between the harbor and Spa Creeks. Hotels, a marina, a restored colonial inn that tourists photographed every fall when the leaves turned. His daughter ran the family company now, or she had been running it until about 6 months ago, from what I had heard around the docks. I looked at her acidly. All right. She did not seem annoyed that I did not react more. "I need a business partner by Friday." Russ made a sound behind me. I ignored him. "What kind?" "The kind, on paper. Legally, signed." She opened her bag and pulled out a folder. Not to hand to me, just to show it existed. "I need someone with standing in the maritime industry to co-sign a development agreement. Without it, my cousin takes controlling interest of Vance Harbor Group at the end of the week." Vance." I wiped my hands on a rag and looked at the sky. Clouds were moving in from the bay. "That sounds like something for your board." "I have a board. They're either owned by my cousin already or afraid of him." She glanced toward the water, then back at me. "I need someone he can't buy." That got my attention. "And you came to a boat repair shop." "I came to you specifically." She pulled a sheet from the folder. Not enough to read, just enough to show she was prepared. 8 months ago, my cousin tried to acquire this property through a holding company out of Delaware. You refused a number that should have worked. I had been wondering if that would ever come back around. He offered too much. Always makes me suspicious. It usually works. Not on a place my father built. She nodded once like she had already known that answer and just needed to hear me say it. "I know what I'm asking. I know what it costs you. But my cousin has buyers for the Harborview Inn and the 2 historic slips on Compromise Street. He wants them gone before anyone can put them on the preservation registry. He has been moving fast and quietly, and I've run out of time to be careful." I knew the Harborview. Everybody in the waterfront trades knew it. 3 stories of federal-style brick, a porch that wrapped the whole 2nd floor, a tap room that had been serving watermen since before the Bay Bridge existed. It had been neglected for a decade. But neglected was not the same as finished. "Why me?" I asked. She looked at me directly. "Because you told my cousin's representative that the yard was not for sale at any price, and then you went back to work. That's not stubbornness. That's someone who knows what something is worth and doesn't confuse it with what someone else is willing to pay." I stepped closer and she did not step back. "You researched me." "I had to." "No. You wanted to be sure I'd fit." "Yes," she said. "I needed someone independent, someone with a real stake in this waterfront, someone who understands that what's standing here isn't just property." I looked past her at Russ, who was now pretending to splice a line he had definitely already finished. "What do I get?" "Compensation, a clean legal arrangement. No claim on your business, no liability exposure, full protection before and after." My attorney drafted the protections first. before anything else. I laughed once. You think I asked because I wanted a number? For the first time, she looked uncertain. What do you want? The truth, I said. All of it. Your cousin, the timeline, the board, whatever you left out because you thought I'd say no. She was quiet for a moment. The bay moved behind her, gray and slow. When she spoke, her voice dropped just slightly. The harbor view was where my father spent every Friday night for 30 years. Not for business. He'd sit at the bar in the tap room and talk to whoever was there. Watermen, charter, captains, tourists who got turned around. He didn't care. He said it was the only place in Annapolis where no one wanted anything from him. She stopped. My cousin sees comps and square footage. He doesn't see what gets lost when you replace something real with something new. Old wood did not lie. Old brick didn't either. It either held or it didn't. Sutton Vance was standing in the middle of a working boatyard in her Friday meeting clothes. And she was holding herself together the way a hull holds, when it's been repaired well enough that you can't see the work, only the result. I looked at the keel behind me, then at the folder in her hand. You understand this drags my name into your family's business. Yes, my yard, my crew, oh, yes. And if your cousin makes this ugly, people won't say you found me because I had integrity. They'll say you bought me. Her jaw tightened once. I know. I watched her another moment. All right, I said. I'll hear the rest. But if I say yes, there's one condition. What condition? Before we sign anything downtown, you come into this yard. You meet the people this decision touches. You stand where I stand. Then we talk attorneys. She looked at her heels, then at the gravel and oil and wood shavings between us. Fine. Not fine. You actually do it. Not a handshake and a smile. You meet Russ and the guys. You see what you're asking me to put in front of my cousin's lawyers. For the first time, something crossed her face that was not strategy. All right, Eli. Behind me, Russ whispered something I did not catch. I did not turn around. Sutton snapped the folder shut and looked at her watch. I need to be at my attorney's office in an hour. I looked at the hull I had been sanding since 6 in the morning. 20 minutes ago, my biggest problem was a delaminated keel and a client who kept calling to ask when it would be done. Now Sutton Vance needed a business partner by Friday, and somehow I had just become the man closest to saying yes. I washed up at the utility sink while Russ stood in the bay door with his arms crossed. He had been with me for 11 years. He knew when something was off and when something was only strange. You're actually going, he said. I'm going to hear the rest of it. That's the same thing. It's not. He looked at Sutton, who was standing by the dock talking quietly into her phone and then back at me. She in real trouble? Yeah, I said. I think so. He nodded. That was Russ. He did not need more than that. I changed into a clean shirt in the head of the workboat. It was the nicest thing I kept at the yard, a gray button-down I wore to client presentations and building department meetings. I still had grease under 2 fingernails, and there was nothing I could do about it. I wiped my boots on the dock mat and made them worse. Sutton was waiting at her car. She finished her call and looked me over once without comment. She did not look disappointed. That told me something. She handed me a thick envelope before I had the door open. What's this? Operating agreement, personal liability waiver, separate counsel confirmation, exit terms, and a full disclosure of the legal exposure on our side. She looked straight at the road as the driver pulled out. I had it drafted before I came to see you. I wanted you to know what you were walking into before you decided. I held the envelope and looked at her. That's either very professional or very practiced. Both, she said. I've been betrayed by people I trusted. I don't do that to other people. I read through it at a red light, or as much as I could follow without her attorney sitting next to me. What I understood was this. My yard stayed mine. My business stayed mine. If the whole arrangement fell apart, she had already built a wall between me and the wreckage. You're protecting me harder than someone who just needs a signature, Usually does, I said. She kept her eyes on the Bay Road. You told me you wanted the truth. Part of the truth is that I know what I'm asking. I needed you willing, not trapped. She had me take her to the yard first, the way I had asked. We walked the whole thing. The dry dock, the storage bays, the older slips. My father had poured himself in 1987. She did not rush it. She asked about a hand-painted sign above the office door, faded to almost nothing. That said Marsh Marine in letters. My father had stenciled himself the year he opened. Russ was at the work table when we came back in. He looked at her straight. You know what you're asking him to do? Sutton did not look at me. She looked at Russ. Yes. And if he says no, I go back to my attorney and figure out another way. But I don't have another way that works by Friday. Russ looked at her for a long second. You actually care about that building? The harbor view. My father used to take me there on Sunday mornings when I was small. Pancakes and bad coffee and the sound of the harbor. She stopped. I know that doesn't matter legally. Russ looked at me. I shrugged once. He turned back to his work and said, without looking up, he'll help. Sutton blinked. I haven't finished explaining. You answered the part that matters, Russ said. She looked at him for a moment, like she was not used to a conversation ending that cleanly. At 11, I was in a small conference room with an attorney named Mr. Castillo, who spoke in clear, unhurried sentences, and had the energy of a man who had seen every kind of deal go bad and planned for most of them. He walked me through every page. Sutton waited in the hallway and did not try to listen at the door. I watched through the glass. She sat in a chair against the wall and did not look at her phone. She stared at the floor like she was having a conversation, only she could hear. You understand this is unusual, Mr. Castillo said. I do. You also understand that it is legal and fully protective, provided both parties are entering knowingly and without duress. I looked at my hands on the table. Does she look like she's under duress? He glanced toward the hallway. She looks like a woman who has run every option and is placing a bet she can't afford to lose. Yeah, I said. Me too. By early afternoon we were at the county business registry office. No ballroom, no ceremony, just a notary with reading glasses and a coffee ring on her desk, a stack of forms, and me standing beside a woman I had met that morning over a sanded keel. The notary looked at both of us. You understand the legal nature of this business agreement? Yes, Sutton said. Apparently, I said. The notary looked at me over her glasses. I cleared my throat. Yes, ma'am. Sutton's mouth moved. It was not quite a smile, but it was close. The first one I had seen from her. There was a moment when they asked for a secondary identifier, and Sutton realized she had her passport, but not the secondary form her attorney had mentioned. She went, still in the way people go still, when something that cannot go wrong is about to go wrong. I reached into my jacket. I've got a secondary. She looked at me. Why do you have? Russ told me to bring everything. He's been dealing with permits longer than either of us. I slid my documents onto the counter. We can use mine as the confirming party. She looked at the notary, then at me. Her hands were not quite steady when she signed the final page. Not enough for the notary to notice. Enough for me to see. When we walked out into the afternoon, the harbor was loud with a charter fleet coming back in. Someone's rigging was singing in the wind. You didn't have to do that, she said. You needed it done. She stopped on the sidewalk. That's not the same as having to. I looked at her. She looked back. It was the first moment since that morning where neither of us had somewhere else to be in 15 minutes. By 5 o'clock we were in a glass-walled conference room on the top floor of a building overlooking the harbor. Sutton's cousin was already there when we arrived. His name was Fletcher, and he was the kind of man who managed to look comfortable in a room he did not yet own. He was mid-40s, good suit, the easy smile of someone who had learned that looking relaxed made other people feel unsteady. His eyes moved over me like he was pricing something he had not expected to see. "Sutton," he said. "This is creative, even for you." She placed the executed agreement on the table. "The partnership clause is satisfied." Fletcher laughed once, short and quiet. "You pulled in a boat mechanic?" "Marine restoration contractor," I said. The room went still. Fletcher looked at me. "I'm sorry?" "Marine restoration contractor," I said again. "If you're going to talk about what I do, use the whole name." One of the older board members looked down at his notepad. Fletcher leaned back. "What exactly did she promise you, Mr. Marsh?" "Nothing you'd understand the value of." His smile thinned. "Money interests most people." "Then you must be easy to read." Sutton turned her head slightly toward me. I knew what that meant. I did not stop. "You expect this board to treat this as legitimate?" Fletcher asked. "I expect you to read the documents," I said. "What you decide after that is your problem." Sutton's attorney stepped forward and laid out the timeline, the filings, the legal language, the clause, and how it had been met. All of it in the careful sequence of someone who had been waiting to do exactly this. The board chair, a silver-haired woman named Mrs. Aldrich, read every page twice. Fletcher watched Sutton the whole time. "You've turned this into a performance." Sutton's voice stayed level. "No. I stopped you from completing a sale you had already started scheduling." That landed. Mrs. Aldrich folded her hands. "The conditions have been satisfied. Temporary controlling interest remains with Sutton Vance." Fletcher stood. He buttoned his jacket slowly. He looked at me. "Enjoy being involved in things that don't concern you." I looked back at him. "Enjoy losing." Sutton's hand closed briefly on my forearm under the table. Fletcher left without another word. For about 4 minutes, it felt like we had won. Then Sutton's phone lit up. Then her attorney's. Then Mrs. Aldrich's assistant opened the door with the expression of someone who had just walked into something they had not agreed to be part of. She leaned close to Sutton and whispered. Sutton turned her phone screen toward me. A local business news site. The headline used both our names and the word scheme in the second sentence. A source identified only as a Vance family spokesperson was quoted, saying the partnership had been arranged in under 24 hours, with no prior business relationship, and was likely intended to circumvent the original intent of the trust. "Fletcher," I said. "Within the hour," she said. Outside the conference room windows, there was already someone with a camera on the sidewalk below. Sutton's driver called to say someone was parked in front of her building. Staff were getting questions. Her personal email had 17 new messages, and it had been 4 minutes. Paper had gotten us through the clause. Paper was not going to get us through the next 48 hours. Sutton stood completely still, the way people stand when they are running every possible outcome at once. I picked up her folder from the table and held it out. "You needed a business partner by Friday," I said. She looked at me. "So pack a bag," I said. "You're staying somewhere Fletcher doesn't know." She showed up at my place near the yard at 8 that night. 1 rolling suitcase, a laptop bag, a garment bag over one arm, and the expression of a woman who had been composed in front of other people for 16 hours, and was not quite ready to stop. My house was small. It backed up to the yard close enough that I could hear the dock lines working when the tide changed. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen table that had survived 3 moves and 1 flood, a porch that faced the water if you stood at the right angle. I had not planned for a guest. I had not planned for any of this morning. "Guest room is down the hall," I said. "Close it sticks. The outlet by the bed is loose. Don't trust it with anything important. Hot water takes a minute." She looked around. "It's small good start." She caught herself. "I didn't mean." "You did. That's fine." I set her suitcase down. Honest people notice things out loud. I've gotten used to it. She looked at me for a moment. "You really know how to make a person feel welcome." "I've never done this before." That first week did not feel like a partnership. It felt like a storm that had decided to have a mailing address. Sutton had attorneys calling before 8 in the morning, board members by noon, and Fletcher's name in her inbox every few hours like he had set a timer. Someone had photographed us leaving the business registry office. Someone else had found the yard's main line. Russ started answering it by saying Marsh Marine. No comment, whether it was Fletcher's people or a customer asking about haul-out scheduling. At night, Sutton sat at my kitchen table with documents organized into color-coded piles, while I ate leftovers across from her and tried not to stare at the system she had built out of my disorganized table in under 36 hours. She slept in the guest room. I slept badly in mine. Nothing happened the way people watching from the outside probably imagined. No dramatic moment in a hallway. No slow realization over candlelight. Mostly, it was me coming in from the yard at 7 in the evening, still in my work clothes, and finding her eating cereal at my table because she had forgotten to eat lunch. And there was nothing else quick in the house. Small things changed. She figured out that the kitchen faucet ran hot on the cold side if you didn't let it settle first. I figured out she worked better with noise. In the background, not music, just the sound of something moving. She started leaving her blazer over the back of the same chair, folded the same way, like she had decided that chair was hers, and she did not need permission. One evening, I came in from the yard and found her standing on the back porch looking at the water. Not on her phone. Not holding anything. Just standing there like she had forgotten to keep moving. I got 2 coffees from inside and handed her one without saying anything. She took it. We stood there for a while. The bay was doing its thing. Neither of us had anywhere to be in that specific moment. My father used to say that the water is the only honest thing about this industry, she said eventually. Everything else can be adjusted. The water just is. He wasn't wrong. He was wrong about a lot of things, she said. But not that. I did not push it. She was not offering the rest of it yet. I was starting to understand the difference between what Sutton was willing to say and what she was waiting to be asked. The next morning she came into the yard at 7:30 with coffee for everyone. Not from somewhere fancy. From the diner on Dock Street that the crew already used. She had asked Russ the day before what everyone took and written it down somewhere, because when she showed up, she had every order right. Russ watched her hand a cup to one of the younger guys, a 23-year-old named Pete, who still got nervous around clients. She asked him something about the boat he was working on. He answered for about 4 minutes straight. Russ came and stood next to me. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone who needed something and left. She still might. He shook his head slowly. She asked Pete his name before she asked about the boat. A few days later I took her through the harbor view. The inside smelled like old plaster, salt air, and the particular quiet of a building that has been waiting for someone to notice it. The tap room still had the original bar, long and dark, with brass fittings that had gone green. The back dining room had windows that faced the creek, wavy old glass that made the water look like it was always moving even when it wasn't. I walked her through the whole building. Not as a tour, as a read. This bar is original, I said. The wood is solid. Someone covered it with a sealant in the 90s that was wrong for the type and it pulled the surface. But the structure underneath is fine. You strip that, refinish correctly, it comes back. I ran my hand along the back corner, where water had come in from a failed flashing. This is the real problem. Water got behind the plaster here. You ignore it, it gets into the joists. You take it seriously, it's a 3-week repair, not a demolition. She was listening. Not politely. She was watching my hands. The windows are original wavy glass, I said. Anyone who tells you to replace them is either cutting costs or doesn't understand what they are. You can't buy this glass anymore. You can restore the frames, reglaze, and weather seal. This building doesn't need to be rebuilt. It needs to be read. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My cousin's contractor walked through here 2 weeks ago. He said the whole interior would need to come out. He's either wrong or he's selling you a gut job on a building that doesn't need one." I looked at the ceiling, original plaster medallion intact, with one crack running toward the east wall. Tearing something down and calling it renovation is the easiest thing in this business. The hard part is knowing what's worth saving. Sutton looked at me for a long time. After that, "I've owned this building for 4 years. Nobody has ever talked about it like it was listening." After that, she was different with me, or I was different with her. I was not sure which came first. At home, she started reviewing my client estimates before I sent them. Not correcting them exactly, making them clearer. "You sound like you're angry at the client in this paragraph," she said one night. "I am angry at the client. They don't need to know that before the check clears." I read what she had changed. She had kept everything I meant and removed everything that would make the client defensive before they had agreed to anything. "You made me sound reasonable." "You are reasonable. You just don't always sound like it in writing." I fixed the guest room closet door the next afternoon. She came in while I was working on it and handed me screws when I asked, in the wrong order, but with confidence. The door closed correctly, for the first time since I had moved in. She opened and closed it, twice checking. "You fixed it," she said. "You asked me to 3 days ago. I've been busy having a business partner." She looked at me sideways. It was not a smile yet, but it was moving in that direction. The papers stayed in my drawer. At first, I told myself it was because things were still legally active. The board situation, the ongoing response to Fletcher's press, the partnership agreement still in effect. But there were plenty of nights, with nothing active, and no one watching, and the agreement sat in my drawer without me touching it. 6 weeks in, Fletcher forced an emergency board review. His claim was direct. The partnership had been arranged in under a day, with no prior professional relationship, had never involved any actual business activity, and existed solely to circumvent the trust clause. Sutton was circumventing her grandfather's intent, and I was the tool she had used to do it. Sutton came with her attorney and a binder of documentation. I came from a morning site visit, still in my work clothes, with the yard's scent on my jacket. Fletcher's questions started carefully. Where did you operate jointly? What business decisions had been made together? Could we produce a single work product that predated the board meeting? Sutton's back was straight. I could see her choosing her words. Before she could answer, I leaned forward. Fletcher's eyes moved to me. "That depends," I said. "On what, Mr. Marsh?" "On whether Sutton keeps leaving her coffee on my side of the table. I had a system. She reorganized the whole right half, and now I put my mug down, and it lands on a legal memo every single time." Nobody moved for a second. Then Mrs. Aldrich made a sound that might have been a laugh she caught before it finished. Sutton looked at the table, but I could see her mouth. It sounded real because it was real, not in the way Fletcher wanted to measure, and not in the way a lawyer could document. Real in the way that her coffee mug was on my counter every morning. Real in the way I knew she could not work facing a window because the light bothered her. Real in the way I had started parking on the left side of the driveway without thinking about it so she could pull in easier on the right. The board did not give Fletcher what he wanted. Again. Afterward, Sutton and I ended up in a corridor outside the conference room. Her attorney had gone ahead. Fletcher had gone a different direction. For once, nobody was watching. She stood beside me with her arms folded, looking at the window at the end of the hall. The harbor was out there, a mile away, but you could feel it. "You didn't have to make it personal," she said. I looked at her. "I didn't make anything. That's what happened." She turned toward me slowly. We were just two people standing in an empty hallway, which was somehow more honest than anywhere else we had been in 6 weeks. "Ellie," she said, quieter than her usual register. I did not answer fast enough because she closed the distance and put her hand on my chest and kissed me. Not for the board, not for Fletcher, not for any room we had ever been in together. Just us, in a corridor with buzzing fluorescent lights, and the distant sound of elevator doors. She pulled back and looked at me like she had surprised herself, as much as she had surprised me. We should probably leave before they charge us for the hallway, I said. She laughed, quiet and real. Her hand stayed against my jacket for one more second. On the drive back, she sat in the front seat of my truck instead of calling her car. Her shoulder was 2 inches from mine. Every light felt longer than it should have. When we got back to the house, she put her bag on the table and stood there, and I recognized what she was doing. She was giving me room to decide. I took off my jacket and set it on the chair. We should not rush this, just because the paperwork got there first. Her shoulders dropped, just slightly. I was hoping you would say that. Don't look relieved. I'm not relieved, she said. I'm just tired of decisions being made before I get to make them. So we did it the right way, which looked, from the outside, a lot like nothing had changed. She still slept in the guest room for a while. I still made coffee that she said was too strong. She still corrected my estimates and pretended it was only professional. But now when she passed my chair at the table, her hand touched my shoulder. When I came in late from the yard, she looked up from her work with the specific expression of someone who had been listening for the door, but was not going to admit it. Some evenings we sat on the back porch after dinner and watched the bay change colors and talked about nothing Fletcher could use and nothing any attorney would file. The partnership stopped feeling like a strategy. It became a habit. Then it became something I did not want to stop doing. Fletcher kept trying for another few weeks, but his moves got smaller. The board had seen enough. The clause had been met, questioned, reviewed, and met again. Sutton had the votes she needed. The Harbor View stayed off the sale list. The compromise street slips stayed too. Then one Thursday evening, I came home from checking a repair in Eastport, and Sutton was at the kitchen table. No laptop, no documents organized into their usual system. Just one folder, closed, in the middle of the table. She had changed into jeans and one of my old Marsh Marine shirts, the faded navy one I used for yard work. Her hair was down. Her face had the specific calm of someone who had already handled the hard part of whatever came next, and was now waiting for me to catch up. "What's that?" I asked. She pushed it toward the empty chair. "Dissolution papers." The kitchen was quiet. The dock lines were working outside. I sat down across from her. She kept her hands on the table. "The terms are completely clean. Mr. Castillo reviewed everything, and I had an outside attorney confirm separately. Your yard is untouched. Your business is untouched. Your house is untouched. There is no liability, no claim, no penalty on your side. Nothing that requires a public statement unless you want one." I looked at the folder. "You rehearsed that?" "Yes." "How many times?" "Enough." She kept going before I could speak. "Fletcher has lost his strongest position. The board is stable. The Harbor View is protected and moving toward restoration. You did everything I asked, and more than I had any right to ask for. I don't want you staying out of loyalty to something that started as a contract." I waited. She was not finished. "You had a quiet life before I walked into your yard," she said. "Your work, your crew, your table. I don't want you to look back in a year and think you stayed because the situation made it hard to leave." That one landed harder than I expected. I opened the folder. The first page. Names, dates, the clean legal language of an exit built by someone who had been careful to make it easy. Sutton Vance, protecting people even when she was the one walking away. I closed it and slid it back across the table. "No," I said. Her eyes moved to mine. "No," I said it again. "You walked into my yard and told me you needed the truth. I asked you for the same thing. So, here's mine." I pushed the folder another inch toward her side. I don't want my table back the way it was. I don't want the guest room to go back to being storage. I don't want to drink bad coffee alone and not have anyone tell me it's bad. I don't want to hear about the harbor view from someone sis after we save it. I don't want to stop knowing what you take in your coffee and what your voice sounds like when you're trying not to be worried and when you actually aren't. Her eyes went bright and she did not look away. I was trying to be fair to you, she said. I know. That's what you do. You build the clean exit before anyone asks for it. I looked at her, but I'm not asking for it. She looked down at the folder, then slowly pushed it further to the side of the table like it had been rude to sit between us. I don't want out either, she said. That was the moment the agreement ended. Not in a registry office. Not in a boardroom. At a scratched-up kitchen table with the sound of the bay outside, and Sutton in my old work shirt telling me the truth without a lawyer in the room. After that, life did not become easy. It became real. The Harborview restoration moved forward. My company led the structural work. We started with the water damage in the back corner, then the bar, then the windows, frame by frame. Russ ran the crew and complained about the scope every week, and showed up an hour early every morning without being asked. Pete turned out to have a feel for original millwork that none of us had expected. The wavy glass stayed in every window. Sutton kept Vance Harbor Group together. Not by softening, by staying. She learned when to fight and when to let the record speak. Fletcher filed 2 more challenges and lost both. By spring, he had stopped trying. A year later, we held a small event in the Harborview taproom when the first phase of the restoration was complete. No press, no board members who came to be seen. Just the crew. A few of the preservationists who had helped with the registry work, and the people who had made it possible. Russ cried once, briefly, and then immediately denied it and went to find another drink. Pete gave a toast that was too long and completely sincere. Sutton stood beside me near the original bar. Under the brass fittings we had cleaned back to gold, with the harbor light coming through the old wavy glass, and making everything inside look like it was slightly underwater in the best possible way. She leaned against my shoulder. It worked, she said. Of course it worked. I knew what I was looking at. She tilted her head up at me. You looked at me for about 30 seconds in a boatyard and said yes to all of this. I knew what I was looking at then too. She didn't answer. She just stayed where she was. Later, when people asked how we started, she always smiled first. I needed a business partner by Friday, she would say, and I would tell them what happened next.